Welcome to the Grow Your Business and Grow Your Wealth podcast with Gary Heldt. Gary is an expert in helping business owners put together a plan that will provide a better future for their businesses, themselves, and their families. On the podcast, Gary interviews other professionals who share his vision, and together they share secrets and strategies any business owner can use to build a better financial foundation for your business and your life.
Hey, welcome back to the podcast. This week, my guest is Darius Ross, and he is a speaker, author, and business strategist with over 3 decades of experience leading organizations through transformation, growth, and impact. He currently is the managing director of Alexander Ross Real Estate Capital Partners, which is a private equity real estate firm specializing in sustainable development and wealth building through smart capital strategies. Welcome, Darius.
Pleasure, Mr. Gary. How are you?
Great. So, Darius, give us your background. Kind of what got you into this? What made you decide to be an author and business strategist?
Well, the bottom line of it was based upon mistakes that I made, mistakes that I saw hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people make over and over again, with just lack of information, not really wanting to ask questions, and I call it the dumb principle, which we'll talk about later on.
Great. So you have over 30 years of experience. What's one of the pivotal lessons that you learned that you wish that every small business owner and yourself knew early on in your career?
Customer taste appreciation, understanding disputes, understanding service, and understanding your product. And what I basically mean by that is I was in a store once upon a time, and the gal, I'm paying a $100 bill for $30 worth of merchandise. And she says, I don't have change. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't have change? I don't have change. Go over there. Now, simple situation, but this is how stupid this is.
Right.
You're in this business and no one has supplied you with enough funds to turn around in an early morning purchase and be prepared. So a lot of times as business owners, you don't go back in your business and see what your people are doing.
Right.
And that's what I mean by customer appreciation. You don't appreciate the fact they're buying, and you might get somebody come in there and buy more. Now, had this guy been smart than own this business, I came back a couple of days later and bought $1,000 worth of merchandise. But had I been pissed off by that experience, his competitor would have got it. So that's what I mean by taste appreciation. Appreciate your customers and appreciate the taste buds they have, that you might have more than they need, but you got to train your people to understand how to deal with disputes, how to deal with servicing, how to deal with product problem.
Yeah, I think, we all see the show Undercover Boss, and I think that is one of the things, and I'm going to say asking for feedback from your clients, from your customers, doing the surveys and stuff like that. And I think, lots of times, especially now where it's like, everybody's asking for a tip, to do their job. They're asking for a tip. I think that business owners do need to take a step back and kind of look at it because we get so stuck in the weeds, need to take that step back and look at it from that 10,000 view up and look at things. How have you helped businesses, take that step back? Because that's a big discussion to have with a business owner. Lots of times the business owners don't want to hear that that their business isn't operating perfectly.
If you have a location, send a relative in, send a friend in, and ask the renegade approach. Are you stale in your thinking? Are you stale in how you're operating? Are you stale in how you're approaching the situation? And stale meaning you're so antiquated as what used to work that now you haven't modernized yourself to new times. New times, new people, new circumstance, even ethnicity. If you're in an ethnic community, you have to understand the locals and how they think. So send someone else in there to see what they say. Send a couple of people in there, mystery shopping. Right. What is going on in my business? A lot of times they don't know. They're so busy reaping in the rewards or so busy thinking I'm on top of the world, not thinking about your business is this close to being pivoted in the wrong direction.
Right. As a managing director, for your firm that you're at now, what do you see private equity in the real estate doing now because there seems to be a lot of commercial real estate that's sitting empty. Where do you see that going?
We are at a pivotal moment in history, particularly speaking with the Trump administration and what's going on there as far as globally. One of the things that I don't think people recognize over the last probably 2 or 3 days, when you see the rest of the world flexing its muscles, the problem now is that the United States is no longer in a position of mastery. So now the rest of the world is basically saying there's 5 billion people here. We don't really need to do business. So you're going to see far more businesses go under, far more situations cannibalized. And unfortunately speaking, in the real estate community, it's going to be on sale. The next 10 years are going to be very pivotal. And for small business owners, this is the time to look at buying your location, buying your headquarters, stop leasing, getting out of debt, and focusing on the real estate business, because it's going to be real estate on sale.
Do you think that that's, obviously there's big business, medium business and small business. Do you think that the small business is going to be able to thrive more because they're going to be able to pivot quicker? Or do you see them not being able to get the capital to purchase this real estate?
There are 70 million boomers that are retiring. So that's going to be about 10 million businesses that are going to either go under or will be dissolved or resolved. So it's going to be like one of those things like what happened with Sears, Kmart's, and Montgomery Ward's and so forth. The business industry is going to be cannibalized. So smart business owners will start realizing how to roll up their competitors and start playing the platform game, become acquisition entrepreneurs, because this is going to be a game that it's a once in a lifetime wealth opportunity. There's $50 trillion worth of wealth ready to transition from baby boomers to somebody. So the question is, are you going to be in that number game, or are you going to be out there in left field?
Yeah. I think that, like you're saying, with so many of the baby boomers that are retiring, again, I see it with my son, a lot of the blue collar jobs they don't have the people. There's nobody there to backfill those positions. And so, people just showing up, are getting paid, but that doesn't mean that they have the work ethic. They don't necessarily even have the skills to be able to do the things that these baby boomers that are retiring have done for decades. How do you see that developing, and how are we, as small business owners, able to help? I'm going to say, get these kids trained to be able to have the skills to do this.
When we look at the trades business, right, there are 500,000 construction workers needed now. There's going to be probably 3 or 4 million more just in the trades alone. And they're not there. They abolished the trade schools back in the 1980s. So now we're going to have to go back to the trade school system. AI is eliminating the need to think. So basically, you can't go in there and have a plumbing AI. It doesn't work. You can't watch a video and figure out how to weld. That's not going to work.
Right.
So we have to go back to the trade school system. There's going to be a need to reprogram the system to look at the fact that it's tradesmen. In addition to the fact we have a huge world now, and the world's getting smaller, and there's certain places in the world where there can be millions and millions of homes needed, millions and millions of apartments. So we're going to have to look at the fact that the United States kids are going to have to find themselves in trade school and trade locations, and they're going to find themselves leaving America for those jobs. See, it's going to be reverse immigration. We're going to find a different situation now.
Right. Where do you see private equity playing a role in this or do you see private equity playing a role in this of getting the trade schools back? Because again, like you said, it was, in high school, you went the college path or the trade school path. And here in Anne Arundel County, Maryland, we do have some of that. It's not like it was when I was a kid and having it, but it's there. Do you see more for-profit schools popping up to do that training, or do you see them pushing that back in the public schools?
I don't see it at all, to be honest with you, because private equity's position is going to be, if it's not going to be dealing with that 7-year timetable that they have as far as increasing the profits, they don't care. But what you are going to see is private equity buying more businesses that are in the trade related and taking those businesses, gobbling them up and transitioning that situation into profitability. So you're going to see a lot of Amazons of the construction trade industry.
Gotcha. What are some of the, what are some of the common mistakes that you've seen, businesses make? I know we talked about, customer appreciation already. But what are some of the other mistakes that you're seeing these business owners make, you know, that are simple, stupid stuff that can be fixed easily?
Accountability and accessibility. Not being accountable to their customers, not being accountable to their trade partners, and accessibility. Not accessing markets that have been unlooked or overlooked.
Like, can you give us some examples?
Okay, in the accountability standpoint, just looking at the fact that you have this huge market, right, and you're doing wonderful business, and then not being accountable to the fact that, okay, if something goes wrong, you look the other way. Even when it comes down to lawsuits and so forth, a lot of times these business owners are looking at it like, okay, I make a mistake. Yeah, I ain't gonna worry about it. Nah, no problem. And looking at the servicing and the type of services they're offering, not thinking about the services need to be dealt with appropriately. Okay, if I do a half-assed job, no big deal. Nobody's going to check me. Nobody's going to counter it. And not realizing the liability issues are there. That's a big thing now.
Mhm.
And then as far as accessibility, there's so many different markets that we're not looking at that are being missed, particularly speaking in the, I guess you want to call it regional markets in some cases, the international markets. So many things are being overlooked. So as a result, we're missing out on opportunities and missing out on profit margins.
Right, right. In many small businesses, you said it earlier, don't own their locations, don't own their offices, brick and mortar stores, whatever it is. How, I guess, how can they start getting into the real estate side, even if they have a limited budget, and being able to do so?
The number one thing is credit. Focusing on a lot of these businesses are either asset rich or cash poor. So they need to get in alignment with that. It's like, okay, why am I leasing this business and paying $5,000 a month when I should be owning it? But the bigger problem of it is that they have all these assets and they have very little regulatory issues about how to turn around and take that asset and turn it to cash. Do I need all these pieces of equipment sitting around unused, or can I lease the equipment and own the building? How do I deal with it from a tax perspective? How do I change how I'm looking at my overall game plan? And in addition to the fact, as an owner, am I looking at more tax write-offs just by having the kids working and the kids aren't really working? And I'm paying a salary for no purpose. Who else do I have? Uncle such and such on the payroll.
Right.
Start looking at now how to look at a building. Because a lot of these properties are 10% down, 20% down.
Right.
So if you're making $40,000 a month and you're not putting that same $40,000 in a down payment on the property, that's insane, especially if you've got tenants on top.
Yeah. SBA is a place that you can go get, some of this lending, and they definitely require the 10% down. Are there other places that are, I'm going to say, non-traditional, not just going to a bank? Are there other places that you see doing lending on the real estate? Purchasing real estate, lots of times the prices, I'm going to say, are high. Do you see that coming down because of, that a lot of them are sitting empty?
You have a couple different things going on. As far as lenders are concerned, you have private equity lenders, you have hard money lenders, you have something that's called NQM, which is non-qualifying mortgages. So you have a lot of companies that deal in just that. So as a result, you have lender opportunities. Now, as far as the property sitting, a lot of that's negotiations. My terms, your price, my terms. So it's just depending on whether or not you want to walk away from a deal or you want to look at a deal and come to terms with the fact of what a guy's looking for. Sometimes it's not all about the pricing. Sometimes it's like, listen, I've got a divorce going on. I've got a family split going on. There are family members that need X, Y, and Z in the deal. So you got to look at the terms, the negotiation principles, and just figure out where we can get the sweet spot.
Right. So you talked about a couple different places for lending. They're non-traditional. How can somebody go about making sure that these places aren't predatory?
There's something that's called a Scotsman's Guide. It's Scott's Guide or Scotsman's Guide. And it lists exactly who the lenders are and their qualified lenders and their lenders that are bona fide. So that's a key thing.
Um, in dealing with that situation, is there, can you give us some ideas of certain things that we should be looking for, when it comes to finding one of those lenders? I understand you're saying go to that guide, but what are some of the other things that the people should be thinking about?
Taking note of the fact of number one, if you're in a situation where your paperwork's not documented properly, a lot of times as business owners, you have very sloppy accountability and accounting principles. So that's very key. The other thing about it is, as far as the lender themselves, when you're looking at outrageous interest rates, when you start looking at somebody offering you 40%, it's pretty solid to what the situation is going to be.
Right.
When they're saying you need to pay back within 6 to 7 months or within a year, pretty consistent with the problem's going to be. You're looking at more of a usurious lender, so that's the key. The other thing to look at is what's the asset. If the asset's income producing, sometimes it's owner financing. Sometimes the owners themselves will finance the deal because they're in a situation where financially they're okay, but they want to get that annuity every single month.
Right, right. Gotcha. Um, you know, looking at our economy right now seems to be pretty uncertain, and lots of places. How do you see, or what recommendations do you have for business owners in scaling their businesses? Because lots of times people want to grow, but they're really not prepared for growth.
You have to make two decisions, I would say. Now, this is particularly speaking to business owners between, let's say, 30 and 50 and those that are 50 and over. Is it now time for you to consider consolidation if you're 50 and over and looking at rolling up? Can I get together with another one of my competitors and consider the fact that we can pull us together and consider a private equity deal where 3 or 4 of us get together? I mean, we're golfing, we're having fun together. Why not turn around, consolidate, sell to private equity and went out? On the other hand, those between 30 and say 50, the issue becomes there. It's now time to look at being a predatory. It is now, they say, a predator preys every day. Well, now if you're a smart competitor, you want to start looking at how do I turn around and take advantage of this industry? If I'm one of maybe 5 companies in that industry, now it's time to buy my competitors, leverage it.
Gotcha. You talk about leading fearlessly. What does that really mean?
Are you prepared to do, as I said earlier about the dummy lesson, are you prepared to turn around and be a guerrilla? And in the guerrilla strategy, it's like the military. You walk into a situation knowing that you have no idea what you're going to face, but you're going to be prepared for whatever's going to come with that. And what that basically means is understanding terrain, understanding the territory, understanding the possibilities of everything that can go wrong and being prepared for it. Not sitting there and saying, okay, I have no idea what I'm going to do when this happens. Being prepared to deal with any situation, no matter what it is, under the circumstances. Bad customer, bankruptcy of a client, bankruptcy of a competitor, bankruptcy of your trade partner, anything. It's like you've got to go in there thinking to yourself, am I able to handle this if the worst scenario happens? And that's what I say. Consider the worst scenarios first, the exit route, not how you're going to keep on maintaining, but what can go wrong. So that's the number one thing I recommend for business owners. Think about what can go wrong and prepare for that.
Right. You talked about the dummy strategy. You've mentioned that a couple times.
Be the individual in the room that basically everybody's looking at is wondering why you're not saying one word. You're absorbing everything because there are 3 principles here. 1, there's the advice to take. 2, there's the advice that's extreme. And 3, there's the advice that's right in the middle. So be the dummy. Accept the fact as a business owner, I don't know. Accept the fact you don't know what you know. And accept the fact that somebody else knows more than what you know. And sit there and just listen. I mean, that's one of the most important things. You have 2 years for that purpose, just to listen, to absorb, to think, and to study it. And let all the other experts in the room tell you what they think. Sometimes in the meat and potatoes there's the answer. But if you're so logically focused on, okay, I got the answer. No. Sometimes 2 or 3 of them have the answers and you just put them together and you have the right answer.
Right, right. Darius, you've given us a lot of good information. What have I not asked you wish I had?
What was probably the worstest experience that you lived through?
That
And
was
the answer was coming to grips with you, your own worst enemy. Sometimes as a business owner, you're your own worst enemy. The only person you hear in your ear is you. That's the biggest problem. Being able to get out of your own head and become less of your own enemy.
how do you suggest someone doing that?
Looking in the mirror and recognizing that now you are at X spot and you came from Y spot, which means that you came from nothing to something. Now, if you want to continue in that same realm, you're going to have to learn how not to find yourself tripping over your own feet. Because sometimes it's like, don't believe the high. You're so high in your own world, you can't see that there's altitude and basically you're not climbing anymore.
Right, right. So, Darius, if people like what they hear, they want to talk to you, they want to find out more, about you and what you do. How can they do that?
They can reach me at dariusaross.com or they can reach me at dariuswrites.com. That's a new series of books that I have out leadership DNA, success DNA, and then triumph over tragedy.
Great. Really appreciate your time today and liked our conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you, Scary. I appreciate it.
Sure. Hey, my guest this week was Darius Ross, and he is the managing director of D. Alexander Ross Real Estate Capital Partners. And I'll see you guys next week.